Hello, welcome back to my channel. I am so stoked that so many of you enjoyed my last video. So today I am back, and today I'm going to be talking a little about injuries. I have been going through quite a few injuries myself over the last couple of years, and just trying to get myself back to a position where I can actually train for something. And it's been really hard, to be honest. Like, it's really hard when obviously like my whole job is being a coach, and so me getting new clients and like selling my business and my service is posting on Instagram of me training and achieving cool things, because that's what people look for in a coach, right? They look for someone who they can look up to and be inspired by. And when I can't do all the things that I want to be doing to show that and showcase my knowledge, it's been a really hard, journey. But it has also meant that I've had to, find other ways to showcase what I can do in my clients without actually, showing off myself, which is probably quite a good skill to also have as a coach, not just relying on like what I can do. I do actually have, more going on. So today I wanted to share a little bit about my injuries, how I've been dealing with them, how I help my clients deal with injuries, and hopefully you'll have some tips that you can take away and learn from, especially if you are going through an injury yourself, or obviously most people do experience some kind of injury at some time in their life. So this might, if you're not injured now, it might not be applicable to you, but obviously at some time in your life you may experience an injury, and hopefully some of this information will be helpful. All right, let's start with, actually before I get into it, please just a reminder to like and subscribe, because that shows your support and helps me know that this is worthwhile and you're enjoying it. So yeah, make sure you like and subscribe. All right, so a bit of background to my injuries. When I was about 12, I got diagnosed with scoliosis, which just means that I have an S shape in my spine, and I'll chuck up my x-ray because it's pretty hectic. And I basically got told that I shouldn't ever run again and not to strength train because it will make it worse, and I'll probably have to have surgery when I get older. And I was 12 years old. I must have been about 13 or 14, but not fun. But I was pretty active. I was doing a lot of running, and I've always been active. I've always been in love with sport. And I was kind of just like, no, like that's absolutely not happening. I'm not going to slow down. I love what I'm doing. And I'm so glad that I didn't take that advice, because I've realized the older I get, like I've had a lot of niggles, which can be probably related back to that scoliosis. But I imagine like if I was not training and I wasn't as strong as I am, that I would have a lot more issues. Like in my school photos when I was younger, I was like really lopsided and didn't really know why. And then now like I can go to physio and they're like, oh, like they wouldn't look at me and think I have scoliosis, because I'm actually a lot more upright and my body's a lot more aligned. But in saying that, because my spine is curved, it obviously impacts the way that my scapulars move, my shoulders move, also impacts the way my hips move. Like when I'm deadlifting, when I'm squatting, things are a little bit out of alignment, so it puts a lot more pressure on different parts of my joints. And that can be really tough and really challenging, but I've spent a lot of time just trying to move as good as possible and efficient as possible. And when I do find niggles, I will try and either adjust my technique or do some different rehab to try and build strength in those areas that I'm realizing are weak and need strength built in them. It has also been really good because it's helped me understand a lot more about the way the body moves and the way that the body works. And I think if I'd never had this experience and never had these injuries, I probably wouldn't know as much as I do know, and be able to help my clients in a bunch of different ways. So it's my scoliosis. Had like a few niggles. I never had any like major injuries when I was through high school with my running. I was very fortunate. But as I got probably a bit older and got more into the gym, I've definitely had like a few lower back injuries, a little bit, some niggles. I do often get like a tight lower back if I've done a lot of running. And probably 3 years ago now, I started getting really bad knee pain. So I was getting pain like basically into the sides of my knees, and I just felt like it was like bone on bone. If I ran through it, I would end up with pain like right down the outsides of my ankles, up into my hips. So just the outside of my legs was just basically absolutely cooked, and putting a lot of pressure onto those joints, because the tendons and stuff were obviously getting really tight, getting under fatigue, tightening up, and then pulling on those joints, which was causing a lot of inflammation. So I spent 2 years basically trying to like rehab from that. And like most of us, like I know I can push through pain, and I probably pushed through the pain a little bit more than I should, and that definitely caused a lot of issues and made it a little bit harder to come back from. But I've just been patient and trying to get my running, and then I finally kind of got to a point. I'd been working with the physio, I'd been doing all my strength work. I got to a point where like I was able to increase my running, and I was increasing that, but I obviously hadn't dealt with my lower back stuff. So I got to a point, and then I ended up doing a gym session the day after a long run, and I was in like this headspace where I just really wanted to push myself in the gym and do a hard session. So I like box jumped and then went into some sumo deadlifts, and I just felt my back get really, really tight. And so that evening I basically like couldn't hinge forwards. It got worse and worse over the day, but it kind of came right the next day. And it wasn't until a week later that I went to put on my shoe, and I was literally just like went to pull, and like my lower back just went bing. And I kind of, over the next like half hour, I kind of ended up more and more close to the ground, kind of got stuck on the toilet, couldn't pull my pants down, was calling like the doctor. I called my mom, and then I was like messaging friends who are physios, and I was like, oh, like how bad is this, like what do I need to do? And in the end I managed to book in with my doctor, and I called Healthline, and I was like, hi, I'm just not sure if I need to call an ambulance or like what I should do, because what had happened is I'd gone to try and go to the toilet, and then my brother was like, oh, why don't you try crawling? You might be able to get it. Because I couldn't walk. The only way I could walk was like if I was putting all my weight onto my legs, like leaning onto my arms. So yeah, I ended up trying to crawl, and then just was on my knees on the ground. It was just basically stuck. I couldn't roll either way because my back I was in so much pain. So the Healthline guy was like, well, can you get yourself to the doctor? Like, can you get yourself anywhere? And I was like, no, like I'm kind of stuck. And he was like, well, you need to call an ambulance. Like, I can call one for you. I'll do it right now. And I was like, no, it's all good. I'll just give it half an hour and see if it comes right. It just got worse. And I just wasn't moving. I was like literally stuck on the ground. It sounds so dramatic now when I talk about it and I'm not in pain, but like it was honestly the most excruciating pain I have ever experienced in my life. But anyway, so I called the ambulance, and the ambulance, they like obviously asked me a lot of questions, and because it wasn't a trauma, like it was very unlikely that I've like broken my back. It was just like the muscles had seized up. So they sent around like a paramedic who was like a technician role. But anyway, she came in and was like, all right, we're going to get you up and moving. So she basically sat with me for like 4 hours, and the whole point was just to like get me moving so that those muscles would relax. And the whole part with like those kind of back injuries is that your back senses, or your spine senses, that there's something not quite right, like there might be a little bit of disc damage. And because your body is trying so hard to protect your spinal cord, because obviously you don't want to snap your spinal cord because that's pretty serious, all of the muscles around it kind of seize up to and as a protective mechanism, and it takes quite a lot to be able to release those muscles, but you do actually need to get some movement into them so that they feel safe again and they can expand or stretch out and contract and like go back to working how they normally would. So that was pretty severe. I was on a lot of drugs for like 4 days, muscle relaxants and oxycodone and all the crazy stuff, just to get that right and to help me move again. So then I obviously went to a physio, we started doing some rehab, and a lot of the like rehab stuff is stuff that I've always been doing for my back. So I was able to kind of get into it like pretty straight away once I knew that I wasn't doing any more damage. And so they don't scan for like 6 weeks. Because the actual, like what the, the prognosis doesn't really change regardless of what the scan is going to show, which was fine. I've been doing that kind of rehab. I'm slowly getting back into running, but then I've like flared it again. I pushed myself in the gym. I was like, oh, it's really, it's feeling good. I'm just going to push myself a little bit. And sometimes that's where like you can get in your own head, because yeah, you can push through, but especially if you're injured, it's like, should you? Or do you actually just need to be a little bit more patient and let your body, heal and go through the process that it needs to get through those next steps? So I have actually started working with a coach who's doing my full programming. And that way it's not just rehab, she's also going to be doing all of my movements. She did a bunch of movement tests the other day, similar to what I do with some of my clients, but obviously a little bit more in depth. And yeah, so she's going to be writing my program, and I'm really excited to be working with her just on some like specific stuff, working on, like what's going on in my knees. We're going to she's realized that like my feet are quite tight, so we're going to work on like getting my feet to move a little bit, because that, if your foot's not moving, that's going to impact like your shin bones, which then puts pressure on your knee, and then your hips, and then your lower back. So everything's really, really connected. And I think the first thing when you're injured is super important is to find someone that you can work with that can actually look at things objectively and be like, actually, this is the process. This is the linear process of how you need to return from an injury. Like, yeah, you might feel good, but you don't want to jump ahead because you just end up putting yourself backwards. So finding someone that you can trust. And I also think it's really important to find someone that has a really holistic approach. Like, I really like my new coach because she, and I'll probably share more about her as we go along, but I haven't actually started with her, so we'll get to that eventually. But working with someone that really has a holistic approach, because the kind of like old school, more traditional physio approach is like, oh, you have a sore Achilles, like we're just going to look at your calves, get your calves really, really strong. But if your foot's not moving properly, it doesn't matter how strong your calf is, your Achilles is always going to be overloaded. If you can't shift your weight backwards, you're constantly like forwards, then your hips are going to compensate by rotating a certain way, and then that puts lengthened pressure on your hamstrings, which then lengthened pressure on your hamstrings, which then lengthens like your calves and Achilles. So again, no matter how strong you get your calves, there's always going to be that tension on your Achilles because the rest of your body's out of that alignment. Definitely, I think it's really important to work with someone that looks at the body holistically and as a whole and how it works together. Something that I've kind of been learning is that like when back in the day when they were first learning anatomy, they looked at the body and they they cut into dead bodies or cadavers, and they saw, okay, this is how the bones work together and this is how the muscles are connected together, but they didn't really look at it as like a whole. And now like there's kind of a different way of looking at it. It's like, well, actually your bones are floating in your muscles and in your fascia, and all of this is linked. So of course when you you reach out, you're not just using these muscles to extend your arm, you're also engaging muscles on the opposite side of your body to counterbalance you so you don't fall over. And when you're walking, like when you go from learning to walk to when you're learning to crawl as a baby, you're learning these like cross body movements, and that's your fascia sling. So that's like those opposite parts of your body are working together to help you to walk and then get the right coordination so that you can actually crawl and then get the right coordination so you can stand up and walk. So if something's out of alignment, or you're favoring one side, or something slightly out of imbalance, usually that's what's going to be what leads down the path to injury at some point. You might get away with it for a long period of time and training's going really well, but then just like a certain load or something, you'll do something that will put you beyond that threshold. And once you pass that threshold, your body's going to be injured. And what a lot of people do wrong, and I definitely am guilty of having done this, is you get to a point, say you're running, and you get to a point where you can run like 30, 40 Ks a week, and then you go up to 45, 50 Ks a week, and suddenly you get injured. You pull back the running till you're out of, and then rest it till you're out of pain, and then you rebuild. But you get to that same point and you get injured again. What people aren't doing is increasing your body's capacity to handle that higher load, because you can handle that lower load. It's not until you go beyond that you actually start to see issues. And it might even be that you introduce speed work or hill training, and then something kind of broke. Not necessarily broke, but you know what I mean. Like you started having pain, or something wasn't able to tolerate that load. But if you only pull back and rebuild again, you're not actually going to increase your body's like capacity to handle that load. So that's when you need to like kind of go sideways and build the foundation. And that's what strength work basically does. It helps, or it like increases your body's capacity to handle or tolerate loads. And that's why like a lot of people who strength training or been running for a long time and they start strength training, suddenly they're able to tolerate faster speeds, they're able to tolerate higher running loads and things like that. But they needed to kind of like pull back the running to build the strength, to build that foundation like a pyramid or like a house. You need to build that foundation wider before you can build that peak, and that peak is like your top speed, your performance, your higher volume, whatever that is that you're trying to push your bodies to that limit. But if you don't have a strong foundation and you reach that peak, you're just gonna, your peak's not going to be that high because it'll just fall over. So really important, and that's why I basically talk about strength training and try and get everyone into strength training, is because we need to build that foundation. And same when you get injured, it's basically like that you've reached your peak, and if you can use that injury as an opportunity to go back, rebuild your foundation, make it wider, you'll find that you can actually have your peak a lot higher, and you'll be able to achieve a lot more, whatever your goal is, whether it's running, whether you're trying to train harder in the gym, whether you're just trying to do a CrossFit competition, all sorts. You need to make sure that you've got that solid foundation so your body can actually tolerate the load. So a couple of things that I guess, mindsets that really help me get through being injured. The first one is like to remember that it's not your fault, and I definitely take that on as a coach. I'm like, oh, like it's my fault. I should have known better. I should have done differently. You know, like why wasn't I doing that in my training before I got injured? All the stories. And it's just important to remember that like it isn't your fault, and you could be doing all of the best things in the world, but something else will break. So you can't be perfect. And while I do think it's important that you take responsibility, I don't think you need to take the blame or like fault yourself. So kind of side tangent, but there's a big difference when you're trying to like explore a transformation, whether that's like you're trying to become a runner, you're trying to change your body weight, change your body composition, whatever your goal is. When you're trying to change something, it's important, or change something in your life, it's really important that you take radical responsibility for everything that's going on. So every decision that you make, or choice that you make, or everything that goes on, it's like, okay, cool, what can I be doing to change the outcome next time? Rather than, and that's like completely different to blaming yourself and being like, oh, I was a shit person, I'm bad, I'm a failure, I did that wrong. It's not spiraling like that, because so often we spiral like that and it's not helping us move forwards. So something I talk about is like positive versus productive versus unproductive shame. And if it's productive, it's like, okay, cool, what can I be doing better? What can I do to help me next time to move forwards? And that is productive. It's like, okay, yeah, I slipped up, but where do I want to be better? What does my higher self want to be doing? Versus unproductive shame, it's like, oh, I'm a failure, I'm a bad person because I did this one thing wrong. So same when it comes to injuries, it's like, how can we look at things and take responsibility for ourselves on what we can do better next time to help us move forwards without without spiraling and shaming ourselves and feeling like it's our fault or like we did something wrong. The second part is to remember that returning from an injury is always going to be non-linear. It would be great if you just had this perfect trajectory, you followed your training, and while you do get, I've already spoken about like making sure you follow the linear trend of like how your body can adapt, it's not always going to be perfect. So it's important to understand that you might have setbacks, and I'm currently going through a bit of a setback. I re-flared my back, which is really frustrating, so I've had to pull back my running, and I do honestly feel like I'm in a bit of a like head fuck at the moment where I really want to get back into running, but I want to feel good and enjoy running, but I'm scared of running and getting injured again, because obviously it's played a big role in my injuries. So I'm a little bit stuck at the moment, but just trusting the process that like it's not going to be linear. This is just a little setback, but once I get through this, I will hopefully, fingers crossed, be able to actually, train for a race and have a much higher peak in that pyramid I was talking about, because I've taken these steps backwards and am rebuilding that foundation. So just remembering like it's not always going to be linear, and just to trust that you might feel that you're having a setback, but you will keep moving forwards, and however far back you feel like you've gone, overall you will be heading in the right direction. The third thing, kind of more mindset-wise to think about, is that a lot of people get really frustrated that they're not going to achieve their goals, and they get really upset, or they're like, oh, I'm just going to push through this injury because I set my goal. So whether it's like an ultra marathon or a marathon, whatever it is, even if it's just a 10K, you've set your mind on like running this 10K in October, and you get injured and you beat yourself up because you're not going to achieve that goal in October. But if you just take away that timeline, you can still achieve your goal. It's just not on the timeline that you set out to achieve, and that's perfectly okay and totally fine. And you just need to be okay with that. You can still achieve that goal. It's just going to be on a different timeline. And really lean into that and give yourself the time rather than just pushing through, because it's usually not worth the damage that you're going to do pushing through, unless you've got like an injury that's just a little bit, an inflammation. And obviously talk to your physio or practitioner about this. Like some injuries, like when I had my ITB issues with my knees, it wasn't necessarily damage, it was just causing a bit of pain. So like pushing through, I basically didn't train and then just ran the race, knowing that I'm not going to achieve like my time goal. If I had a time goal, I probably wouldn't have run, but because I was just going out there to enjoy it with the Femi girls and make it fun, it was like, oh, I'm not going to do any more damage, I can push through that pain. But if I had like an actual time goal or something that like a performance goal, I definitely wouldn't have pushed through that, and I would have set my sights on a different goal and just been like, it's all good, it's not on my timeline. If running and pushing through is going to cause more damage, like it's absolutely not worth it. I know we see these people like David Goggins and these incredible people that are out there like running on fractured feet. For most people, it's not worth it. Like their bodies are going to be so wrecked later on in life. So I think it's like, okay, cool, you can still do the thing, you just don't need to do it right now. Like look after your body, look after your longevity, because having a healthy body well into your like later years is going to be far more important than running this one race like a year before you're actually ready for it. So I think, it doesn't mean you need to give up on your goals. You just need to adjust the timelines and be totally okay with that. In terms of like, not necessarily physically, but just like actually looking at an injury, I think I spoke a little bit about the like looking at it holistically, but if you have like say a knee injury, it's really important to consider what's going on at the foot, what's going on at the hip, and what's going on like in the rest of the body. And again, use it as an opportunity to learn more about how your body works, because a lot of people's bodies work differently, and you might not ever find out exactly what it is. You might not be able to pinpoint like exactly what caused the issue, but if you kind of like break it down, you're like, oh well, my body's not moving quite well in this way, I could improve how I'm moving, and then that fixes the pain. That's going to be great. It might not, but you're going to be moving better anyway. So it's kind of like you can't necessarily figure out exactly what it is, because there's always going to be like a combination of things. Like it might be your foot and your hip that's caused your knee pain, or it could be something completely different. So just really important to like use this again as an opportunity to like learn more about how your body moves, how your muscles need to be working, and to make it in an optimal way to help you get better and get out of pain, basically. So one of the things you can think about as well, so obviously we want to think there's the joint, and then you can think above and below. If your body doesn't feel safe in a certain position, your brain does not want to let you go there. So that's a really key one for like overhead mobility or like shoulder mobility. If your brain doesn't feel safe because your muscles aren't strong enough to hold you in this like say lengthened or overhead position, your body will actually compensate. So you will use other muscles, which might mean you might bring your shoulders up, you're going to lift your chest up, you're not going to be able to keep a neutral spine because you're still trying to get into that position. And so a lot of people end up getting shoulder injuries because they keep forcing themselves into those certain positions that their body does not want them to be in, and that can often cause injuries. So again, we need to step back and go, okay, how can we get stronger in that end range to keep our rib cage down, our neutral spine, to get our scapula moving properly so that our brains can feel safe and allow us to go into those positions and not be causing pain. So there's a few different ways that you can kind of actually look at an injury and figure out how to work on it moving forwards. Another one as well is that it's really important to keep fueling. Just because you are not going to be you might not be exercising quite as much as you were, it does not mean it's a good time to go into a calorie deficit or cut your calories significantly. Because your body's still going to be kind of like rebounding and absorbing all of the training that you've done previously, and that needs fuel, but also to actually heal your body and to heal your body and come back from an injury. Again, you actually need fuel and you need nutrients to be able to do that. So cutting your calories and being in a deficit is not great. It also puts your body under a lot more stress, and when your body is injured, there's obviously already a stressor there, so we're trying to remove stress rather than add stress. So no point being in a deficit and adding stress to your body when you are trying to recover from an injury. If you have had a stress fracture or you're constantly getting niggles, it's also super important to look at your energy availability and potentially go and chat to a doctor about your hormone and menstrual health. If you're not getting a regular period and you keep getting injured, you're going to have to address the food stuff going on before you're ever going to be able to get out of being injured. Otherwise, you're just going to end up putting yourself back in a hole. If it is a traumatic injury, so I've been talking mostly about kind of like niggles from training. If it is a traumatic injury, like you've rolled your ankle really badly and things like that, there is a certain amount of rest that is needed. And so you obviously have to follow that advice, and then your rehab is super important. So don't neglect your rehab just because you're excited to get back into training. Prioritize your rehab over your training, over everything else, because otherwise you end up having so many more issues down the line. And so many people that I speak to are like, oh, I should have just done my rehab properly at the start, because then I wouldn't have all of these issues now. So reminder to do your rehab. And obviously like asking for help. So I've said that, find a professional that can help you, but don't be afraid to, don't feel like you have to do this all on your own. Reach out. find a coach, find someone else, even like find someone else that's injured so that you can have someone to talk to about your journey. Don't feel like you have to do it alone, because there are so many people, and again, everyone approaches injuries from their experience and their knowledge base. So it's really important to find someone that works with you and you feel like they understand what you're going through, because then you can obviously trust them. But if a coach has never had an injury or never experienced athletes with injuries, their advice is going to be completely different to a coach or a physio who has worked with a lot of people with a lot of injuries and has been through injuries themselves. So working with someone that knows what's going on. And same as well, like if you go to like a foot doctor for an injury, or like a podiatrist, they're going to look at your feet to help you fix the issue. If you go to like a chiropractor, they're going to look at your spine to help fix the issue. So like there's no point just going to one person. Like get different opinions until you find something that is working for you and you feel works and is like, yeah, good for you, you trust them, and starts working for you. If something's not working, like don't feel bad about going and seeing someone else or getting a different opinion, because you just want to keep asking questions, because everyone knows different things. And like I've worked with a bunch of different coaches, and some things have worked, some things haven't worked, some things have worked for certain things, and then it hasn't been until I've gone to someone else and then they've taken things that next step further because they've got a different knowledge set or skill set to help in different ways. And then lastly, I just want to touch on you just have to remember that there's no specific end point. Like you might get out of pain, but you're going to be always, if you're trying to push your body to the absolute limits, you're always going to be having to, look after your body in some way, whether that is making sure you're warming your joints up properly, you're working on your mobility, you're stretching, you're foam rolling, you're eating enough. Like there's just so many tools that you want to have in your toolbox, and managing injuries and looking after injuries is always just going to be something that you need to be able to access at different times depending on what is going on. So there's not necessarily like an end point. You don't go from being injured to suddenly being you end up being like healthy and you're able to train again. But it's really important to remember that you do need to always be looking after your body and thinking, okay, how can I be moving better? What could be my next injury? How can I prevent that from happening? Like doing your prehab work and things like that. Yeah, so I will hopefully share a bit more of my rehab journey with my back as I go along and as I've been working with my new coach, which I'm super excited for. But if you do have any specific questions, or if you want to share anything, make sure you chuck it in the comments below. But otherwise, that is it for now. I will see you next time.